Delighted to have you here and delighted to once again be kicking off our MPW web series. Got a wonderful panel, as I said, stretching the globe tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Robb, CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be bringing to you tonight Making Sustainability Matter, how to go beyond surface level initiatives towards purposeful events in a new era of shared responsibility. And certainly had lots of interest from this, people dropping notes along the way. I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful discussion. And just before I go any further, I'm going to drop a quick poll in. I always put these different polls in. If I can find it here, sorry. There we are. Just pop a poll in to understand who's joining us tonight. Love you to do that as I continue with the most important part of the evening so far, and that's introducing our panelists, starting far in the east from Chico in California, Shelley Villalobos, 5 a.m. in the morning, Managing Director, Council for Responsible Responsible Sport. Hi, Shelley. Wonderful to see you.
Good morning, Chris. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
It's close to 2 years since we met. Mike had introduced us virtually many times, but we were together at the Chicago Marathon nearly 2 years ago, which brings me to Chicago and a wonderful friend of MPW, Mike Nishi, the Chief Operating Officer of Chicago Marathon, obviously joining us from Chicago. Hi there, Mike.
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. Great to be on the panel with Ian, Shelley, and Tony. And thank you for this opportunity, as well as everyone joining us today to talk about a very important matter in terms of making it matter. So appreciate this time and to talk about sustainability. Thanks, Chris.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. And heading now further in my direction, I guess, coming from west to east. I put you on the east coast. I should have put you on the west coast there, Shelley. Ian Hain, Client Services Director, Limelight Sports, joining us from London. Hello, Ian.
Hi, Chris. Great to be here today. I've definitely lucked out with the time zones, I think.
Spot in the sweet spot. And drinking a big, strong coffee and keeping himself up at past 10 p.m. in Hobart, Tasmania. And for those of you that need a geography lesson, beautiful island off the southern tip of Australia, kind of below Melbourne. Tony Bonney, who is the MD and Head of Strategy, Grow on Purpose.
Hey, Chris, how you going? And I'm really noticing your T-shirt and my jumper this evening, this morning, mate, is all I can say. Welcome, everybody. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, wonderful to have you, Mike. Tony, and Mike, of course. A bit of quick housekeeping before we get underway. As always on these webinars, everyone's automatically muted. Best way of communicating is through the chat and the Q&A. We are recording. We're live streaming on Facebook Live at the moment. So if you happen to have to jump off or some of your colleagues or friends missed it, the recording stays on Facebook Live. We're also recording and we will post it on the MPW YouTube channel by early next week. A couple of the other ongoing MPW initiatives. Strength in Numbers is back the first week of September. So that's Monday the 6th for Asia, Middle East and Europe, Singapore time in the afternoon. And on Tuesday the 7th of September for Australia, North America, Latin American time zones. That's just a Zoom chat room to get together and share and exchange what people might be dealing with or being challenged with, or insights or whatever from around the world. The next MPW web series is going to be on the 23rd of September, and that is going to be a global update. There's so much that's been happening in the last little while, and we have this huge gambit of people that are still in hard lockdown, like poor Onslow in Vietnam and quite a lot of others, and people in Mike's situation in America and Ian's situation in the UK, where lots of events are happening. I thought it would be great to bring together a global update, share some learnings from those that have been able to get back on track. So that is Thursday, the 23rd of September. As always, if I can help you with anything, connect with me, LinkedIn, Facebook, drop me an email, chris@massparticipationworld.com. And then the final piece, which I keep getting more and more feedback, is really proving to be valuable. We've been running the MPW COVID Transmission Study. The numbers go out every Friday, and it's not super scientific. We're just gathering data from all over the world from people that have staged events at least 2 weeks after their events. The number that we will put out on Friday, it goes out in our Road Ahead newsletter every Friday, and then we usually post it on social media on Monday. 3,091,622 participants with 4 reported COVID cases. And I know for a fact that these have been used in submissions by the likes of Berlin Marathon and many others. So the key for me now is that we keep this going. If you've had an event, I think Tom Kerry's on the call. I don't know, Tom, if you could just help me out to pop that survey link in there. I think actually I might also have it copied in my chat. Let me just try. I'll pop it in later. Tom's put it in there anyway. Yeah, it's really important that we just keep adding this data. So if you wouldn't mind helping with that. But let's jump into the real reason that we're here is to talk about sustainability. We're going to cover a lot in the time that we've got. We've got an hour, about probably 52 minutes left. We're going to talk about clarity of purpose and alignment, and really talking about not just a one-off for your events, but how you engage it with your business and align with your business purpose. We're going to be talking about, I see lots of people kind of limiting their sustainability lens to environmental sustainability, and obviously that's a real key. But I think there's a lot of ways we go beyond that with economics, social and societal sustainability. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the importance of long-term view, and probably no better example than Mike Nishi and Chicago Marathon, Chicago Event Marathon, in terms of having taken a long lens to this and built it into their ongoing strategy. What does that mean from a benchmarking perspective and so on? We're going to talk about partnership and collaboration. And then, the thing I often hear is it's too expensive, I can't afford it. And we're going to try and debunk part of that myth and identify maybe some low-hanging fruit in terms of how you might be able to save some costs. But let's get underway. And, real expert in this space who's worked with a lot of organizations around the world, bringing purpose to their organization, getting clarity of purpose, taking a whole of organization approach. I'd love to start with you, Tony, on that and give your insights into what you see around that in terms of embedding it into an organization's overall purpose, please.
Thanks very much, Chris, and I really appreciate you actually starting with purpose, because I think that it is the right platform. An organization that stands for something can mean something and can do something different from its competitors, and through that process, through that manifestation of being different, can really firm itself up as a preferred organization in the mind of the stakeholders that want to engage with it, whether they be competitors or sponsors or whatever they might happen to be. So when we start thinking about purpose and sustainability, for me, it's actually at the heart of what makes an organization sustainable across every measure. And actually enables an organization to view the ways in which it can be sustainable across all of those measures. So economically, environmentally, societally, in the ways in which it engages across all the stakeholder groups that can do those things. And I think the key thing about this is not just the idea in which purpose gives you a frame through which to think about how to be sustainable. I think the other part of it is it actually gives you a frame about how to be sustainable in a way that makes great commercial sense as well. Because if you can actually build that sustainable model, if you can actually build that preference in a way that helps you gain market share, that enables you to gain a form of notoriety or brand recognition, and particularly in a moment like this, as we're all in different moments in COVID, if you're gaining market share at the moment, for example, with a fantastic purpose platform that's making you appealing across all of your stakeholder groups, as we're able to re-emerge out of COVID, as the tide rises for all, you'll actually rise higher, because you'll have more notice from the marketplace. You'll have more market share. You'll be more sustainable because you've undertaken that work. And it all just comes down to that fundamental thing that if you stand for something and you can bring that into the experience of your stakeholders, you'll mean something to them, and that fundamentally will make you more sustainable. So I think that's just the very first principle, really, when you're getting into this conversation. I'd love to be challenged on that by the panel as well, if anyone has a different view of that, or a sharper articulation than what I've just given. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, Tony, again, I don't think I'm going to push back or counter that, and just to be full disclosure, we've been doing some work with Tony as well, and it's been really helpful and insightful in terms of really helping identify what is our purpose. And just from a company standpoint, an organization, to really identify what is that purpose, the why we do things. And sustainability is an important part of who we are, our DNA for the founders. And obviously we want to align and hopefully align with all of our employees and stakeholders as well. So again, it really helps answer why we do what we do at the level that we do it. And I think that's really, really important. And I think those are things as we want to talk about. It's not just one single event that we do it. It's built into our DNA, our culture at Chicago Event Management, and something that's carried throughout all of our team members, and that's carried throughout the events in which we serve. And something that Tony's told us as well. And it really helps us be that foundation and truly identify how we need to be in service of others, whether it's for work, whether it's for the events, whether it's for the participants, and clearly in the communities in which we serve. So, it's been really helpful to really have that purpose. And I think, just as Tony mentioned, it does help differentiate our company or the events. And at the end of the day, and that's really important, is it has definitely helped from a recruiting standpoint, as difficult as it has been for all of us to fill a lot of the different roles that we might have, different positions with the events. If they really hear and can identify and their values align with ours, that recruiting is somewhat easier, and they're going to come our way. And the others, as everyone's been struggling with as well, is retention. As everyone has seen, is people leaving organizations, but if they truly value or align with our values, that's something else that they're going to want to stay with their organization or be part of the event. So, for all those purposes, it really has helped to focus on that why, the purpose of the organization, and this has been a major part of it.
Thanks, Mike. And interesting, I see you, and I think many in the industry see you and personally and Chicago event managers as leaders in this space, and you're doing work with Tony on purpose after having been in this for, I think you've been in it for over a decade, you said on our planning call we had a few weeks back. So what that seems to allude to is it's an evolutionary process, and you don't just kind of say, okay, this is where we are, we sit on our laurels and put a kind of a spoke in the stand and keep coming back to that. Can you maybe share a little bit about how that has evolved, and what prompts you, to realize that it is time to kind of refresh and review?
Yeah, well, luckily I'm not that smart, so I have a lot to learn. So, I've been taking a long time to get to where we are today. But and of course I want to flip this over to Shelley in terms of the work that she's been doing, and she's been helping us guide and create that framework with us to kind of with our company, with the events, with Council for Responsible Sport. And this has been something that we've been working on, Shelley, I think 10 plus years now when we first got started. And again, we knew that we had to start somewhere. We knew that we had to draw a line in the sand. We didn't know how to do it, but we knew it was important. But we needed to find a partner to really help us, to educate us. And, we were at the very beginning, and the only thing that I knew at that time, which is important, is reduce, reuse, and recycle. However, when you peel the onion back, there's so much more to it. And without that type of criteria, without that type of guideline, we would have been lost. It would have been like drinking, water from a fire hose, right? But but by having this, the criteria and these standards built out for us, it made it somewhat easier, and it kept challenging us over time. And one of the things that has been interesting, and we'll save this for later, I'm sure, is that we always want to challenge ourselves. Fortunately, you can't use the same initiative and solution year after year. You always have to challenge ourselves to do something different to be able to reach that standard. So it's really given us the ability over time to be able to get to the level that we are. And I think we'll talk and give some examples that come to mind in terms of how we got to reduce paper to go digital, what made us kind of think and made us curious about that. The other is go carpetless in our expo, and we have some metrics that will help. And as you just said at the beginning, a lot of people think it's costly to do sustainability practices, but those two examples specifically has really helped us from reducing a cost and a line item. As you can imagine, for Chicago, that's been rather large. So I don't want to take up all this time, but I want to hand it over to Shelley as well, that, with our relationship and how that began and really helped us and guide us to where we are today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Shelley, yeah, I would love to hear your insights, because, I would imagine that, we're seeing this ever increasing wave of people recognizing the importance. But back then when you started, I'm guessing it was really, it was in the minority, and it must be, massively encouraging for you to see this movement, but recognizing at the same time that there's so much more to be done. And to Mike's point, he said it was great not to be drinking from a fire hose, but to have someone to kind of guide them along the way. Can you maybe give some examples of, how you have been able to make that process easier for people, and for people that might be sitting here saying, man, this is just so daunting, we don't know where to start. How do you take that first baby step and get some of the low-hanging fruit?
Great, thanks, Chris. Yeah, all really salient comments, and I want to acknowledge Tony's first comment, right? That idea that an organization that stands for something can do something different, do something meaningful, and that's really what excites me about the work in this space, and that has driven a lot of the motivation in my work in the past decade. And I think, to Mike's comment, it's really around event organizers are developing a new professional competency. This is, in the last 5-10 years, as we start to more collectively as a society become aware of our ecological impacts and the social shortcomings that we continue to grapple with at all levels of society and governance, right? We start to wonder, what's our role in that, and how can we contribute? Because there's no one coming to save us. This is us, right? And so taking that personal accountability for our actions, and then extending that view to the events that we put together to host people. It's such a powerful and exciting platform, such a positive atmosphere, right? That it's so fun to watch this space develop over the years. And I feel lucky because I just get to collect all the gems of the stories and the examples that all of you hardworking event organizers are innovating on. And so, I think that when you mention examples, I don't know how deep we want to get into it at the moment. I want to give space for everyone to chime in with their own examples. But, coming back to the cost factor, for example, because I know that's a big one right now, especially as we start to recover events from COVID and come back. I just want to make the assertion that it's really a question of scale when it comes to price, because I think economics is an issue of how we design the economic model of our events. That plays in. And then when it comes to scale, for example, if you're going to buy recycled material envelopes to send out your packets, or if you're doing virtual events or whatever kind of mailings you've got to do, right? Looking for recycled material, so that we're closing the loop on and not just sending things straight to landfill, right? That might be a little bit more than the ones that are just traditional from virgin paper, but when it's at scale, if it's going to be $100 or $200 more versus if you're spending $100,000 on t-shirts, does that really make a big difference? And if it's a visible cue of your values, that you're taking the time to think through those material purchases, right? And that it's a tangible touch point for your people that shows them, that demonstrates that you have that value, I would say that might be worth it, right? So it's thinking about cost and expanding our view of what has value beyond just the dollars and cents. I'll leave it there for the moment to see if anyone has other examples to chime in with.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And I'd love to come to Ian, because one of the things I see, and the poll that's running at the moment is already kind of reflecting that, is that most of the industry I see sees sustainability primarily, predominantly around environmental sustainability. And, right now it's running at kind of like 68%, seeing that as most important, and very few seeing the value of social, societies and economic and societal. And I know Limelight's done a lot of work around all elements of that. And I'd just love to get your insights around, some of the actual examples, amazing work that you've done with Royal Parks Half, and that goes way beyond just the environmental element of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think firstly, just going back, fascinating to hear the conversation around purpose. I think something that we all need to kind of remind ourselves of is that as an industry as a whole, I think we are purpose-led. That is at the heart of who we are. And I think therefore it's a very natural progression that we should all make sure that we're manifesting ourselves with purpose-driven messaging. And I think what's been wonderful in recent times is particularly the strong focus on environmental sustainability has brought that sense of purpose up to the forefront again. But yeah, you're quite right when you point out, Chris, that something we've tried to really focus on here is not just looking at sustainability in terms of the environment, and of course that is crucial and deserves an important amount of attention. But equally alongside that we have an impact in terms of the communities that we work within. We have an impact in terms of an economic impact of where we go in and deliver and who we impact on and their lives. And that needs to play as an important role, in my opinion, when it comes to gearing up to a sustainability strategy for our campaigns and our events. And I think it manifests itself in a pretty simple sort of equation, in our opinion, is that everybody needs to win. I think when we go in to deliver a campaign or an event, it's sitting down at the very start of the planning process and actually saying, well, what is in it for everybody that we are going to touch along the way? And that means, ourselves as an agency, that means the client that we're working for, the partners that we bring into the mix, the consumer, that means the community that we go and work with, the suppliers that we work with, that means the environment, absolutely everybody. How do we ensure that everybody wins? And I think actually, if you've constantly got that focus on things and that way of looking at your planning strategy, then you do have sustainability at your heart. And then that comes to the whole point of, well, is it cost effective, etc. Well, if it's part of your strategy and part of your day-to-day planning, it's not something that's just thought of as an afterthought. It's not, hey, we're putting on this great event. Hey, has anyone thought about sustainability? Let's go and have a bit of a think about that. It's part of what you're doing. And I think that's where we've tried to really focus on it. And I guess our practical example, our most kind of practical example at Limelight, is that we've actually created 3 working groups within the team to focus on the 3 core pillars of sustainability. So we've got a working group looking at environmental impact, social impact, and economic impact as well. And obviously we can pull all of those things together, but it just ensures that from an education perspective, we're educating our team, we're developing our team, and we're learning as we go in all 3 of the core areas.
Thanks. Some great insights there. And Tony, I'd love to come back to you on that in terms of, your experience of then a little bit what Ian's alluded to is that internal team, but, some tips to make sure that sustains across an organization. It's great to have the vision. It's great to say this is our purpose, but, some experiences that you've had, and, I'm sure with your work with Mike, and I'd love to get Mike's insight and everyone's insights is how do you do that internal education? How do you make sure that the team's on board? It's not, sitting around in a boardroom coming up and saying, yeah, this is our purpose, and then it gets kind of lost in translation along the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, purpose is a dynamic thing, and I'm not a purpose purist, right? So, and what I mean by that is I believe that a purpose it can actually, that's the word I choose to use, is purpose, but it can be, there's a range of words that people use. But when I say I'm not a purpose purist, what I mean is, what is it that we really believe in that matters to us, and how are we going to manifest that together? And it can be at a technical level, this is what we're going to do. And that can be a really great place to start. And at the very highest level, it can be the light on the hill, the distant light on the hill that's you're going to be striving to achieve forever, right? So, but anywhere in that spectrum, in my view, is of great value as a starting point. And the whole thing about this is that the organizational purpose that we're talking about here, or the event purpose that we're talking about here, is powerful. But the only thing that can make it work is the way in which the individual's purpose comes to service to it. That the individual can actually see themselves self-actualizing through the actualization of that purpose. And so leaders and organizations need to understand that. How do we be of service to those people to enable them to self-actualize inside our organization and bring their personal purpose to life in service of this larger organizational purpose that we're trying to achieve? And that commitment, that dynamic is amazing. And the statistics on that are actually pretty interesting in that leadership that in fact isn't clear on its purpose, but is great at helping individuals actualize their own purpose in their organizations, those organizations are almost as effective as having the ideal of a great organizational purpose and people actualizing towards it. So the key is down to how leaders understand the ways in which they're enabling or disabling their people from connecting to that purpose. And when you start thinking about purpose in an organizational sense, you stop thinking about it like an organizational structure. And you start thinking about what matters to me and what matters to you and what matters to us and how do we bring that together. It's a thing called the Wilbur Model, the integral model. It's the I to the we to the it. The wonderful thing about that, and Ian's alluding to it in Limelight, is you start to organize differently. So you can actually have, Steve from accounts, working, with, Jan in marketing, and Chris and Barley, on a purpose-led project inside the organization that makes perfect sense because that's how they're actually actualizing themselves inside that organization. So it's called an adaptive framework. There's a lot of stuff that goes through. We could go on for quite some time. I've taken enough time already on it, but as you can see, it really comes back down to that fundamental thing of leadership understanding the ways in which they're enabling their people to activate. And the additional thing I want to say then into the work is you start to see things that you haven't seen previously. Mike and I have been having a fantastic conversation, for example, around are events passing through communities or are they actually building communities? So, if your event is running through an urban area of a city or of anywhere, and the people in that event aren't representative of that community, then that event's not sustainable. That's a tourist activity. It's actually not doing anything for that community. And until you get that purpose lens on, you start to understand the ways in which, what is it we're here to do? What's our larger thing we're trying to achieve as an organization? So therefore, why is this event being staged? And so therefore, in the staging of that event, how is this community we're moving through being represented? That's when you start to actually get really sustainable. And you can see that perhaps if that community is not being represented, well, what's the money that's being left off the table commercially? Look at that just alone as a new source of funding and support. So, it's not about the money, but the point is, if you're smart about this, the money is there also. And so it's just not as easy to see. It's sort of lying fallow around it. But you need this different lens to go looking for it.
And my sense would be that needs to be very collaborative and consultative. And I've seen many examples. In fact, you and me were on a call 2 weeks ago talking about, an event that decided that they wanted to be environmentally sustainable and that they would put on compostable cups. And they put on compostable cups only to discover that the town that they were in had no way of processing compostable cups. They ended up in landfill and they created more problem that they were planning to solve. And you hear in the charity space of, well-intentioned people going into villages in Africa saying, we're going to give you this. And when they really dig down into it, it's nothing that those people want. And they actually end up doing the opposite of what they're achieving. So how do you, and I'm throwing this to the group, how do you make sure that you address that? I'm sure, Mike, you've got some experiences. Shelley, you've probably seen some, but any great examples without necessarily naming names of maybe a good one and a bad one, of someone who went and then thought this was a great idea, and because it hadn't been thought through and it hadn't been consulted and engaged with all of the stakeholders in the community, it didn't achieve anything, and maybe one that's had a great outcome. Anyone like to grab that one?
I'll give a great outcome. Can I take the positive? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I mean, look, we've done a lot of work with our own portfolio events, talking about how we place community at the heart, of what we do. And when we go into, and Tony, I thought that was absolutely fascinating point. If you don't put community at the heart of what we're delivering, then you just become a tourist event, right? And the community you're going into is effectively a gun for hire, which, that isn't everybody winning. Financially, maybe, but it's not everybody winning, because that community couldn't care less whether the council's getting some money out of it. They just want to see the benefit to themselves. So what we've tried to do is really focus on how do we engage that community. And the example I'll give is of our Hackney Half event, where actually we've worked very closely with that local community, bringing local community groups into the heart of what we're actually delivering, so that they feel like it is their event. It's their event to be not just be a part of, but almost take some ownership over. And the community therefore comes around to it. We bring partners into the space who want to deliver something for the local community. So loads of initiatives around that, things like reduced entries for people in the local community, so that they feel like, they're getting preferential treatment. As I mentioned about community groups coming into the space, we put on a free 5K run that sits alongside the half marathon to engage local young people to come and get involved as well. So it's that kind of, I haven't given you one specific example there, Chris, I apologize, but slightly more holistically about going in to build an event with community at its heart. If you get that right, then suddenly the community feels like it is their event. It is not something that's being put on in their back garden. It is something that they're a part of. And I think that is a big win. And I guess an example of when that doesn't go so well would be, we've all been there. Like plenty of people I see on this webinar today are event organizers. We've all been there. We've all been shouted at by an irate resident, right? Someone who's annoyed because their roads have been closed or whatever. What we actually want to get to is to be able to turn around to that irate resident and go, yeah, but look at what this is bringing to you and your community. And I think probably back in the, you go back a fair whack, there have been times when I sort of sat there and gone, I can see why you're annoyed, because we're just closing your roads and you're not getting much benefit from it. So I think you just got to make sure that you're balancing that up.
That's great. Thank you. And Shelley, I'd love to come back to you on that, because, we spoke in planning about benchmarking, and obviously, understanding where you start and where you go to, but how do you integrate benchmarking with making sure that community is at the heart of it? Get some examples of, where you've seen those evolve as you go through. And I'm taking a little bit of a sidestep there, but I think a lot of people kind of say, okay, so one of those measures that you've alluded to is the person shouting at you on the end of on the side of the street, they're in, and you say, well, it's bringing this into the community. But we all seem to need in many businesses these days to have benchmarks and measures and so on. And you've set this up for such a long period of time with Council of Sustainable Sport. So how do you blend those two elements together?
Yeah. I think a good measure of how well you are doing engaging with your local communities is looking at your volunteer retention. Are you getting a group that is excited to come back year after year and support this event? Those are your people that are really helping deliver. And I'm sure some of the organizers could agree that they would struggle to deliver the event without them, if be able to at all. And so treating, Mike can speak at length to what it means to actually do proper hospitality for a volunteer group, but it doesn't have to be, it don't have to be expensive things. They have to be well thought out things, right? They need to be intentional things. And so just thinking and asking people, right? If you do have a solid cadre of people who have come back year and year, asking what it is that brings them back and what it is they'd like to see more of. I think that, that two-way street of communication is so important. And so that would be one thing. There's an example that's coming to mind. You mentioned not to name names, but in the Midwest, a large marathon in Canada, they do a great community like stations along the route where the different communities can come and host a party essentially, and they give them the tent space and they provide them a small budget to do, you know, whatever they want to do, if they want to have coffee service or whatever, and make that invitation, and they get a great turnout. It's been year over year growing and growing, but it started with this idea that, hey, this is their neighborhood, let's give them a space to turn out for these people who are, you know, achieving a bucket list item, or who are just running their next marathon, but whatever, let's make a celebration because we're out here and we're together. And so that seems like a great place to start, is to look at an example like that, and how are you structuring your neighborhood engagement through your route. And that takes time, you know, it takes outreach. And so it means giving someone in the organization the agency to go and do that outreach and speak on behalf of the organization, and make that open the door of conversation and make an invitation to engage.
I think that's a hugely, you know, valid point to come up to Mike, is, you know, it takes time, it takes outreach. You know, some people on the call might be saying, yeah, well, we just don't have the resources to do that. It's a long, slow burn. You know, it starts with the first step. You've been doing it for 10 years. You know, got some amazing examples. Any insights in terms of, you know, what you learned along the way, what worked, what didn't work, maybe, Mike, in terms of engaging with those communities along the way and building that long-term relationship?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're still learning, and we still don't, you know all the communities, and we need to know them better. That's always a challenge for us as a company, and for each event that we serve as well. You know, we are always trying to find a better way to connect with our communities and neighborhoods. Just like Ian had mentioned, you know, we just don't want to thrust an event, or like Tony said, just run through a community. You know, we want to ensure that they, you know, our job is to build an event, to create the platform for people to perform, whether it's, you know, the athletes, whether it's the volunteers, or the communities at large. And that's the message that we need to send. It's their event. You know, we're just producing it, we're just creating it, and then it's up to them in terms of what they want to show on that platform. And I think that's something that, you know, we've been trying to do, and work with those different communities and get to know them better. It's like to really ask those questions, like, what are they in need of? And I'll give one example, and it's about the compostable cups. And sorry to hear that one organization, you know, went through the length of the compostable cups and couldn't do anything with it. On another hand, you know, we've been able to do that working with our partner. And they've been able to source a compostable bamboo cup. They shared based on the collaboration, that resource, that we were able to create all of our water cups. So at the end of the day, our 20 aid stations that are distributing millions of cups were able to collect, and then, you know, go to a local composter, and again, a small company, to be able to make enriched soil. But we asked that question in other cities, like in those communities, in those gardens, like, what are some of your struggles? What are some of the resource needs? And it's like, well, they have to buy the soil. They're looking for the soil. So it's like, oh, let's see if we can work together and figure this out. So then we're able to take the compostable cups, work with a local small business to be able to make enriched soil, and then make that donation back to community gardens. And so we came out with the solution, and all of us are benefiting. And it really helped us create the opportunity to tell that story and get the volunteers excited, get those communities excited, share that story to our industry partners to really illustrate what can be done. And as you can imagine, when you can give that example of, here's a cup, you know, here's my cup, and it's pretty tactile, and then you can actually see in terms of what can be created. Here's some soil, and you're actually touching and feeling and creating a volunteer project by taking that soil, putting it back into a garden in a community. And so it really gives us the ability to tell that story, and people, it just resonates. They're like, I get it. And then you can really use that story to educate the volunteers what can be done. and they're taking that back to their homes. They're taking that back to their places of business. They're taking that back to their communities. And it really has enabled us. It's like, it challenges people, makes them curious. And then, and again, and Tony says it so well in terms of, through that shared struggle and experience emerge our best selves. And that's what we want to do. We want to show what can be done. And when you go back to those volunteers that might have been raking up all those cups and bagging them and making sure that there's no cross-contamination, sometimes they ask, why are we doing this? And then you actually show them what can be done and how it benefits a community or a different neighborhood. They just say, hey, I get it. I'm doing this again. So there, again, is there some additional cost in that? Of course. But at the end of the day, that outcome, you know how much people would pay to be able to do that? A lot more than we actually spend to get this done. And again, from a measurement standpoint, everyone loves metrics. We have that ability. You're measuring the cups in terms of the weight, how much soil comes out of it afterwards, how much we're able to do an after volunteer program after the event. It takes 6 months to be able to create the compost. Gives us another opportunity to reconnect with those volunteers, with the community after the event is done, and it's a continuous cycle. So again, if you think about it, it's like, oh my goodness, that one initiative that might have cost a little bit more money to do is now giving us a story that we can continue to tell 6 months after and do something for that community, so it still is in the consciousness of the community that we're impacting. And talk about a marketing and advertising strategy. Which agency wouldn't love to do that? We've been able to build that into our practice and what we do for an event.
That's wonderful, Mike. And when I first started talking to you about this, you kept talking about closed loop, and you've got so many closed loop examples, your heat sheets to park benches. Maybe talk about that one just quickly as another example.
Yeah, again, as soon as you take a nibble, in terms of what can be done with the cups, it started, making us curious, like what other, items and things can we do to find that recycler? Where are some of these other opportunities to work with companies we never dealt with? Working with a company called Trex that can take and recycle that specific plastic that's into the finish line blankets. And then they're able to make products, combine it with sawdust, and then make outdoor planking. And so they have outdoor benches, outdoor furniture. So we're able to buy that back from the company and then make a donation to the park where we donated soil, or to just another public facility. And with a little plaque on there, it's like, this is donated by the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. So again, when you're able to show, like, here's this wrap at the finish line that everyone gets, and then you give someone the opportunity and make something tangible, it's like, well, that sheet was able to create this bench that you're sitting on. So again, it's all about being able to tell the story, doing those measurements and being able to report back to our participants. It tells a great story from a press standpoint, volunteer recruitment, and people want to be part of this now. And the same thing, and the last thing we do is, like, the plastic bottles. So sorry, Sally, I do have a plastic bottle here. But we're able to collect.
Which button do I press to get him off the webinar, Shelley? Hit the virtual eject button.
Yeah. And I think I've told this story so many times, and probably a lot of the listeners have heard, but we found a plastic bottle recycler, and of course, reduce, reuse, recycle. A lot of times it's like, oh, I'll just recycle it. Half the time most of the time people don't know what happens with that. And so we've been able to work with another company that takes that bottle to turn it into a flake, turn it into a pellet, turn it into yarn, and it makes recycled polyester that a lot of the shirt is a technical tee by Nike, and sorry to use the brand name, but they use this is made from plastic bottles, right? And so when you're able to make and create and show what can be done, you create that aha moment. A lot of people just don't know that, and it's part of our education process. And now people think differently. It's like, oh, I have 2 plastic bottles here. And if you work with this company, you realize just 2 plastic bottles can make a pair of socks. And when you can deliver that to a child, a student, they're like, well, instead of just chucking this in a landfill, I'm going to recycle this. because I can make a pair of socks. So it's just changing the way that we perceive things, and that's our job. At the end of the day, we have this amazing platform that we can do so much education, whether it's at our companies and obviously through the events, and deliver that. And people are taking this back to their homes and where they live, work, and play as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Shelley, we spoke about, we've spoken a lot about collaboration and partnership already, but you had a couple of great examples of, we're talking about, how does this kind of a lens help attract partners, corporate partners to the event? So, Mike's spoken quite a lot about supplier partners. Obviously, Bank of America is a really important partner there, but you shared a couple of great examples where utility companies had come to events and said, we want to partner with you because of what you stand for and the way we can integrate it into the event. Can you share a couple of those, please?
Sure, of course. And the thought starter that I'll give the audience to grapple with to begin is, imagine the difference in the conversation when you go to sit down for the first time with a potential sponsor, and instead of saying, well, how much signage would you like on the course, or whatever your usual is, imagine saying, hey, we really genuinely care about the ecological crisis and we want to do better. Is there anything that you think we could do? Like, what are you guys doing about that? Imagine the difference in the conversation just to open it up with a question, right? Or state a value that you hold dear. And that you want to stand for, and see where that goes. A couple examples. There's a group that is a company called Green Mountain Energy, and they do renewable energy procurement in Texas. And they did a partnership with the local marathon in Fort Worth to say, we'll donate a pair of shoes to your youth running program, because this particular marathon uses their partnership platform to raise funds to get kids in shoes, and they fit them for them and get them running and do some youth coaching program. That's been a long time in the making as well, but now they have that platform, right? So this deal was for every household that signs up through the marathon for our solar energy service. It's a service. It's like your month, basically you're just going to not pay your normal utility bill. You'll pay this one and you'll be getting solar energy. So they said, we'll do a pair of shoes for every household that signs up. And that's what's built on. And so there's this like two-way purpose-driven or purpose-led partnership that's using the platform, right, and the large audience of the marathon to expose them to this option that they can use to make their own personal lifestyle more sustainable, and help support the energy transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies. So that would be one example. And they just got it started this year. And you know what? It didn't have a ton of people, and they're not going to give up. They said, we're going back next year and we're going to keep building this thing. It takes time. And so I really appreciated that the organizers didn't feel like it was a flop because they didn't get the numbers that they hoped for in the first year. And I think that that was a conversation too at the beginning, just, hey, we don't know how this is going to go. This is new. And both parties being okay with that, right? That's helpful in a partnership. The other example is another utility company in Florida that became a title sponsor of a half marathon there, and they used their space at the expo to do an electric vehicle demonstration and talk about how they could offer services to help get your to get solar on your roof that can charge your electric vehicle, and preparing for the next generation as we electrify the road fleet, everywhere, but it's accelerating and it's coming down the line. So they're wanting to be out front on that, and they thought that the marathon was a good place to put it out on display. And they even did a commercial on the local television stations with the race director in the EV and talking about their races commitment to sustainability, and then highlighting a few of their initiatives. So again, like a two-way mutually beneficial opportunity to just put that forward and say, we care about this, we're taking action, we're looking at ourselves and our actions and our decisions, we're trying to make better choices for the planet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelley. Ian, let's come back to you. I mean, you've got a portfolio of events, and I'm guessing that you're sustainability initiative, even though it's central to the way Limelight does business, they vary across those different events, and I guess the sum of the parts become this massive whole. Can you maybe give some sense to the people that are watching that might be taking those first baby steps? Obviously where we started with Tony, getting it right from an organizational perspective, but when you roll it out into the public facing element of those with the events, give us a sense of, where Limelight started and where it's evolved to now across some of that portfolio, and maybe the integration of partners into that. Because, your Royal Parks Half has got an amazing partnership, which, has renewed and sustainability at the center of it.
Yeah, I think I go back to my previous point about the importance of sustainability being at the heart of your planning. This isn't something that should come in at a later date. It's got to be there right at the start, and I think that actually lends itself then to the question that's kind of going around a bit around can we afford to do this, and it takes more time to do it. Well, actually, I'm not convinced it does take more time, as long as you baked it in from the outset. And I think that's the critical piece for me. Yes, there are potential innovations you could do that might add to a budget, but then there are also others that are, that wouldn't necessarily. So I think so long as from the outset it is there as part of everybody's thinking, then that's the key focus for me. And as you mentioned, across the various portfolio of events that we work across, Chris, yes, there's a different approach in place for each one, and sometimes that might be a little bit due to different budgets that are in place or different partner focuses, but it has to be part of every single conversation. It has to be part of your strategy from the outset, and if it's there, then it's always just part of it. It's not something that you have to make a huge effort to think about, because it is integral to your thinking. And then when the delivery actually gets rolled out, it's not an added on, it's not a value add, it's just there. Which I think is critically important. The other thing where we've really developed, and this has been driven by insights from our audience, is that we know that sustainability is important to our consumer, and I think that's something that everyone's got needs to remember within our industry. I think we're going to actually get to the position where it's not a case of can we afford to do this, it's more can you afford not to do it. Because the reality is obviously we're all passionate about it. Look at the panel here, everyone obviously very passionate about sustainability within the industry, but it's not just because we're passionate about it, it's also because our consumer is as well. So who we're talking to, who we're engaging with, and that is only become more and more and more so into the future as well. That's not something where we just kind of hit peak sustainability. It's gonna be there, and it's going to advance, and it's going to increase, and we're all going to have to adapt, and it's going to be a pivotal part to the way that we are addressing things. So rather than seeing that as a problem, be part of the solution, be there at the point of the planning, and that's the approach we're trying to take at Limelight, is build it in from day one. It's not an afterthought, and I think if you have that approach, then I think generally speaking you can't go too far wrong.
Thanks, Ian, and I wanted to touch again on the cost side of things, because that's an objection that I do hear, and you've already to some degree debunked that, particularly if it's built in from the start. Mike, you were sharing some astonishing numbers for us, and would love to get some of those savings that you shaved. Obviously, not everyone on this call is a Chicago Marathon, but just to give a kind of a sense of where some of the low-hanging fruit for people that might be starting out might be able to make some savings.
Yeah, sure. And again, I just want to build off what Ian said as well, and truly identifying the importance of why we need to do this, and it is important that our participants are looking for and expecting. And again, that's the current participants, right? And I think the majority, whether it's here or the UK, you're talking for a marathon, you're talking that age is like 30 to 40, right? And maybe it's not baked into our consciousness at this age. Of course, that's what we're hoping, that we want people to care about sustainability, but it's the next generation. We need to start investing in these things that are going to be important for them. My daughter is like 16, and she is like really behind sustainability, social, economic, equity. Those are things that are so important to the future generation. And we know that we're already struggling or always are trying to focus on it. It's like, who is that new next generation of runner? And it's the same thing that we talked about from the very beginning. Where is that purpose, that alignment, and what we as a company or those events stand for, that those participants want to stand for as well. And they want to be part of an organization or event that aligns with their values as well. So those are things that just kind of, it should encourage us to continue to look at this, because again, it's not just the cost of being sustainable, but it's an investment into those participants that is of importance and of interest to them. To some of your things that we talked about, yeah, of course, that we're all different scales and sizes, and some of the things that we've looked at, that's challenged us again. When you take a look at the standards by responsible sport, you come to a point. It's like we need to keep being innovative. And just think of ways where we can reduce. But a couple areas that we wanted to showcase is, we have been reliant on a lot of paper, guides and programs and results books, and we're making that step to go digital this year, and it was pretty hard to do, but it took a lot of internal conversations, externals with our partners. But we know from a sustainability standpoint that it's going to make a difference. But even before we did that, we did take the effort to go and do the measurements, the metrics, and be able to showcase how much paper that we use in a given year. And then just like I said, if you could tell the story, it's like, yes, it's X number of pounds, it equals this, but when you can also make the comparison, it also saves X number of metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions to make the paper, X number of trees that it takes to make the paper. Then people start to get it, and then the partners say, hey, we're fully behind it. So from a sustainability standpoint, that has helped us. From a storytelling, that has helped us. From a budget, it has really helped us. The other one, from a partnership standpoint, there's a lot more that we can do digitally. We can broaden and distribute those digital guides globally and make it available to anyone. Not just the participants, but to the volunteers, then to the spectators, making those ads and links through there back to our partners. And so they're getting more visibility for their partnerships. So that, and the other part is like also working with the university, be able to help us to find those metrics and come up with something. Not we're just saying, oh, we think this is what it's going to be. It's like, this is what it is. This is the facts. Here's the measurements. And the other one that we had done is, once you start doing this, you start to challenge yourself. It's like, where are some of these other areas that we can save and be sustainable? And one area that we knew that could save a lot is is the carpeting in our expo. Granted, not everyone has an expo the size that we do. And even if there are large expos out there, maybe a lot of them didn't do wall-to-wall carpet, which we had done, which, as you can imagine, from a budget standpoint, from a workforce time, as well as materials, costs a lot. And so when we removed that, and not just from a budget standpoint, but we knew what it took to produce hundreds of thousands of yards of carpet to go wall to wall, that's a lot of inventory, and what it took to produce the carpet. Even though the carpet was the decorating service would take the carpet, roll it back up, and take it to a large facility to clean it. It's great, but that took a lot of water, right, to clean. It took a lot of fuel. It took, I think, 3 to 4 semi trucks to haul the carpet out to a facility in another state. And so then you start to think about, they're transporting that as well, all the water. It's like, why don't we remove it? And let's tell that story. And then we worked with the university to do all the calculations in terms of how much that helped from an impact to the environment. And I think, we work with Shelley as well, and she did share the number. I think it was like 55 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions saved. And again, it sounds like, okay, what does that mean? So again, when you want to boil it down and make it tangible for people to visualize, that's 17 round trip flights to go visit Ian in the UK, right? And so that's how much we're saving in terms of just removing the carpet, not from budget, but also removing greenhouse gas emissions from the environment to go back and forth to hang out with Ian. So those are things that when you take a look at it, there's some things that You might think that there's a cost when you're going sustainable, but there's a number of things that's going to help you from a budget for your events as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. And that's a perfect segue as we wrap, because we're pretty much on time. But one of the last polls I wanted to run, which Shelley gave us, was to get a sense of if everybody understand what the biggest climate change impact from an event is. And that's, in fact, travel. And Shelley's got an interesting way that you can potentially offset that travel. So lastly to you, and then just come to Tony and Ian for a quick wrap from their side, and we'll wrap it up. We're running a couple of minutes over now, but this is a great conversation, and I'm sure people will bear with us for a couple more minutes.
Terrific. Yeah, Chris. Okay, so yeah, the council's been doing some research, gathering all of the reporting that events that have sought certification have told us that they are. We asked them to report their greenhouse gas emissions, and as you all know, the greenhouse gas emissions are what's causing the heating of the climate. And as we face this global climate crisis, it's how do we take action to mitigate or eliminate our impacts, right, in all the ways that we create them. So 98% of the average events, mass participation events, climate contribution is from that event related travel from participants. And we'll soon publish that data in more specifics. But the one single action that's cost neutral but high impact is to offer your participants at the point of registration the opportunity to chip in to an offset fund. And so this is a mitigation fund that will grab those funds. The cost is relatively low. So the average participant in a event under 20,000 people would cost less than $5 to offset their emissions. For a larger than 20,000 people events, it's a more international or larger audience. So the per capita is closer to a $7 offset cost at 290 kilograms average greenhouse gas emissions per participant. So if you can give them this point of choice in their registration flow and let them make the decision, right? And then there's this idea of the nudge where you make the default what you want it to be. So have the box checked and say, we assume you're going to do this, but if you don't, you can opt out. But it's an opportunity to tell them what you're going to do with those funds, and that would be choosing a high impact carbon offset project. And there are many third-party verifiers of projects that go and they find those reforestation projects, and they're doing the nature-based climate solutions where it's actually drawing down that carbon that we have excessed in the atmosphere, and it's drawing it back down into the plant matter, into the soil, and really supporting those financially. So it becomes an economic funding model to get so that we're not overshooting our ecological boundaries, right? And that's really the crisis that we face. It's how do we do that? So that would be the invitation to you all to consider. It's a simple option for them to chip into an offset fund that can be part of your event's legacy to be part of the solution.
Thanks, Shelley. Ian, let's come back to you for a final say. If there was one tip that you were giving any one of the things that you've learned, you've given many valuable tips tonight already, but one last word that you'd like to leave people with on their sustainability journey, what might it be?
Yeah, I think the big one to take away for me is that it makes business sense. It makes good business sense. I think we talked about the fact that we are a purpose-led industry. Our consumer sustainability is important to them, so it makes good business sense to have sustainability at the heart of what you are doing. And I think just echoing Mike's point earlier around, we do have a responsibility to educate. I think we extol the virtues of participation, sport, having an emotional connection with our consumers. Well, let's take that emotional connection one step further to demonstrate actually that through what we are doing, we can have a positive impact environmentally, socially, and economically as well.
Awesome, thank you. First word, last word, Tony, Bonnie. You're going to be in bed in 5 minutes. It's 11 o'clock at night there, but have you got a final wonderful nugget for us, please?
Well, I'm trying to imagine another moment in my life where I've managed the first word and the last word. So that's amazing in itself. So, but look, I think the key is sustainability matters, right? But why does sustainability matter to you and your events and your organization? What's the purpose of it? And if you can bring that to life, you'll find the ways to create a platform that activates all kinds of things you're currently not imagining. Believe me, sustainability isn't the things you can already see. There's so many things you can't see yet. In the same way that Mike found socks out of plastic bottles, believe me, there's all kinds of sustainability, and it's an ongoing journey. And if your purpose is the platform for activating that, it's amazing what partnerships you'll find, the people you'll find, the community you'll find that will create it for you. You won't have to find it yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great way to end. Please join me with a big virtual thanks. Going in the reverse order, Tony Bonney, about to go to bed in Hobart in Tasmania. Ian Hayes going to have the afternoon, and hopefully England is still batting well in the cricket and making your summer for you. It's India looking to be saved by the rain this time. Mike Nishi in Chicago, thank you so much, Mike, and Shelley Villalobos in California. Thanks to all of you that have stayed with us. A reminder again, we've been live on Facebook, so if any of your colleagues missed it, and we're recording as well, it will be up on the MPW YouTube channel. Join us for Strength in Numbers, 6th and 7th of September. Give us feedback if you've had events. We're over 3 million. We want to keep growing. There's still lots of people in many geographies that are really struggling. The more we can help this industry across the world, it's about sustainability. Sustainability matters. Getting back to events obviously matters. And looking forward to seeing you all somewhere down the track. Have a great sleep, a good rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much, everyone.